Hi everyone, welcome to week 5 of the RIAK project, power ranking project series, not the best of starts. You'll see I'm not on a bike this week, that's because you're not going to want me basically. So this week we have got a 40-kilometer time trial, and I think that says it all really. You are not going to want to listen to me chattering away whilst you're turning and burning over 40 kilometers. Now, what I did want to do though was, prior to the race, was just explain why the hell we're doing it and how it fits into our power ranking project series. Now, as I've mentioned before, guys, these sessions are all going to go up onto the power ranking project page on our website. So you're going to be able to do all these sessions again. Okay, so what I did want to do was just make sure that I added something to explain why the hell we are doing this. But yeah, so why are we doing this? Why are we doing a 40-kilometer time trial? Well, each of these sessions, as we've explained before, are intended to try and elicit something about you, primarily in terms of what we call your peak powers, so your personal bests over different durations. So the best power that you can put out over 5 seconds, 20 seconds we look at usually as well, but it's not kind of one of the key ones. So it's primarily 5 seconds, 1 minute, 5 minute, and your FTP. And each of those different kind of durations and the max power that you can put out over them, it does kind of dictate what type, what form of energy production your body is leaning towards. Those shorter durations, those sprint durations, you're using very much an anaerobic form of energy production. The 5 minutes, you're looking at kind of hitting your what's called your VO2 max. So the maximum volume of oxygen you can utilize in any one kind of situation. But tonight what we're focusing in on is that FTP. Now typically you're used to collecting FTP data in kind of, you know, boring, pretty brutal performance testing sessions, whether that be just like a 20-minute testing session or our full spectrum performance testing session that we did with our athletes last week, I think it was actually. And the feedback's always the same. Why? Generally. So yeah, but doing something like a 40-kilometer time trial is a really good way of gathering data that will inform you what your FTP is. Now, you've got to remember, FTP, your functional threshold power, is a really important metric. It's one we're all obsessed with. It basically denotes where your aerobic kind of capacity is, the point at which you start to work more and more anaerobically, in those anaerobic energy systems that we talked about in previous sessions, they start to kick in. Now, yeah, FTP, it also, guys, and this is I think something people don't always fully appreciate, is that it also is meant to denote the average power, the max average power that you can sustain for a full hour. Okay, not everybody appreciates that, particularly if they're less experienced. There is an article on functional threshold power on our website called Do You Know Your FTP? Super original title. But yeah, basically guys, a 40-kilometer time trial is a really good way of kind of gathering a really accurate FTP in a slightly more enjoyable way. Another way you can do it is precision coaching. They put on handicap races. Obviously I shouldn't really be kind of talking about other coaching outfits, but they do some fantastic races, they're handicap races, and in particular they do some very hilly ones. And I remember doing one that was going up, was it Stelvio, I think? And I got a really, really good FTP data from that. So it's basically forcing you to do the full hour, but hopefully in a slightly more enjoyable way. And you've got competitors to race against to kind of drag that extra power out of you. But ideally, this is kind of how we would do it every time. But doing a full hour, full gas, as you guys are about to experience, is physiologically pretty demanding. So basically guys, top tips when it comes to time trialing, okay? Build into it. As I say, 40 kilometers, you're looking at an hour, maybe a bit more, maybe even under an hour if you're a bit of a hitter. But hitting an hour for 40 kilometers, that is generally considered to be like a top benchmark to try and aim for. You may not reach it this time, but as I say, these sessions will appear on the RIAK Power Ranking Project page, so you'll be able to do these types of sessions before, enter a 40k time trial on RGT, whatever, guys. But yeah, doing a full hour full gas is your FTP. So that's what we're after with this 40k time trial. So try and bear that in mind if you can whilst you're racing. You know, go full half of it, if you're going over the hour mark, really push it for that full hour. And then essentially that average power, that is your FTP. It's pretty simple. Okay, so just about 4 minutes before you get going. Top tip, as I say, build into the race, guys. Okay, it is tough, but it's much better to kind of build into it as you go and finish strong. You will do much better that way than if you hit out too hard. Maybe you see someone you kind of fancy trying to beat and going out too hard trying to match them, and then just falling off a cliff and dying 1,000 deaths towards the end. Build into it, I promise you, it's so much better. In terms of the course, we are doing a course that's local to me actually. It's used regularly for time trials. The road surface on RGT is going to be a hell of a lot better, I can promise you that. There's one section in particular coming down from a little village called Mentmore where the road is frightening, to be frank. So you don't have to deal with any of that, you can just concentrate on putting out the wattage. You can see from the course it's not perfectly flat, nor do I think any time trial should be, really, personally, but that's just me. I know some of the wattage monsters just love a dual carriageway or something like that. But so you can see there's a few little lumps in there. That first one is really short and sharp. I think it's around 300 meters, like, so it's really short and sharp. But you can see from the top at the bottom, it's got some gradients in it. Okay, so obviously you're going to want to attack that, but just bear in mind you've got 2 laps. You've got to do it a second time. Okay, so just make sure you leave something in the tank, and you then go up. So that's the climb up to Mentmore. You've got a very short little descent, lovely long flat section, and then that second little climb you can see on the first lap. That is much more gradual, but it's quite a bit longer. Okay, and that second one in particular, I find when we kind of do this sort of stuff with our athletes, is where the damage can really be done, because you do the first one, you smash it, and then you think that second one is just a little bit of a roller. It's got a bit of bite to it. Okay, so just be careful on that second hill, and just remember you've got to do all this twice. It's a 20k loop. But best of luck to you all. If you're doing the live session, drafting is off. It's a full time trial. You'll be going off at the same time, I believe, so you can race one another, but you won't be getting, you shouldn't be getting any drafting effect. So just about a minute and 20 odd to go. It's good to, just sort of 5 or 10 minutes, just kind of keeping an eye on people. But as I say, guys, you're not going to want to hear from me when you're turning and burning. So start getting that music up loud, and just bear in mind you are looking for your hour power, looking at both the average power for the 40Ks, but also you want to start to look at things like your aerobic decoupling rate, okay, which we've talked about in other sessions. Your decoupling rate is when you're holding one of the ways it's useful is if you're holding a constant power and the heart rate starts to rise, it's decoupling away from that power, and you're basically working harder for that power. Anyway, we'll talk about that on another time. You've got about 30 seconds to get going, so rev up the old legs and get ready for business. So this course is a local one near Tring, which is kind of roughly where I live, Tring, Berkhamsted. I'll just talk a little bit about when we do this with our athletes. I always try and mention the duck pond that you go past at Wing. Always a lovely feature. If I was more organised, I should have brought some photos so you can imagine it in your head, but I imagine you've got other things on your mind as we go. So here we go, off we pop. Don't worry, I won't be hanging around for too long, but we've got some guys. There's Mike, Face it, Mike, remember? And we've got some guys who want to hit out hard right from the front. Well into the red. So just remember, guys, when you're on RGT, when you go into that red, obviously RGT works off your FTP as it is. When you go into that red zone, that means you are above threshold in quite a big way as well. When you're at sort of around amber, it means you're kind of at or around that threshold. And then yellow, you're sub threshold, and then green, you're in sort of like a zone 2 or a kind of cruising type level. So guys, just remember that you want to build into this. So you want to try and do what we call a negative split. So probably particularly for this, as it's a 40k time trial and you're essentially testing your FTP, you want to be sub FTP for now. I would suggest build into it. There's 2 laps. When you get onto that second lap, that's when you can start to think, okay, now I need to push. And the way I try to brief our athletes, whether it's triathletes or time trialists, the way I try and brief them is, you want to get within fighting distance of that finishing line. And as I was saying earlier, you'll perhaps lose less time, I think is perhaps the way to think about it, if you are building into it than if you kind of die 1,000 deaths and suddenly the wattage goes off a cliff. So really good on you guys. Keep doing battle, just scrolling through, see how everyone's getting on. I'm loving the use of the RIAK kit this evening, guys. Great to see you, Matt. Good man. And yeah, just duking it out, guys. Another little scroll through. Don't be afraid to wear that RIAK kit, guys, when you're with your avatar on RGT. Yeah, you see people are just starting to settle in now into that sub threshold. We've got don't know their first name, Stauffer and Ozdemir and Daniel at the front, absolutely going for it by the looks of things. Into the red. Have you gone too hard too early, guys? Potentially. That's it, Mike. Stay nice and steady, mate. Forward, keep building. Let's see if you can pick them off towards the end of the race. Right then, guys, I'll stop chatting nonsense, but just remember what you're up to. Yes, it's a time trial. Yes, it's a race, but also you're after that hour power. Okay, so you want it to be reflective of what you can hold for the full hour. So just bear that in mind, okay? And do not give up. Right, guys, I'll leave you to it now. But thanks very much for joining. I will see you next week properly for week 6, I think it will be then. And we'll be doing something very, very different. Okay, guys, and have a great race.